share of complaints is Tim Shaw from Absolute Radio. He's here with former BBC Deputy Director General Will White. Good morning to you both. Should they be sacked, Will?
Well, it's a hard call. I mean, I'm a grandfather too. For me, the first thing I would do is punch them on the nose, but that not being available, I think the decision is whether they get some kind of retribution, which frankly I think one way or another they ought to, or B, that the difficulty that you do if you sack them, you take away from the public, the licence payers, programmes which clearly many of them enjoy hugely. So, you know, on whom do you take it out in that case? But so I think it's quite a hard call there.
We've never had a response really like this from our viewers about this issue, Tim, and overwhelmingly they condemn what happened in mildest. That's putting it mildly. Radio 1 listeners, on the other hand, thought it was, some of them, quite funny.
Absolutely. I mean, I've done many sort of similar things myself. My issue, I've got many issues with this. One of my main issues is the fact that 2 people complained, and that was due to the language when the programme was when it was transmitted, which is a situation you've got with typical British, the unwashed that just complain, you know, after the event.
Well, hang on, you calling most of you all right.
Well, whatever. But I mean, there are 10,000 people who have complained after the event. Now, I've had situations, I know as a broadcaster, you have people, there'll be people watching this now who loathe what I do and just complain because they can and they've heard about it, you know, down the grapevine. To think that 10,000 people have complained about this and they didn't actually hear it. There are comments.
Well, a lot of them have, because they've been, of course, having had the publicity. As you know, 2 people complained at the time. There has been a delayed reaction, but that's a lot of people who are now reading the transcript and seeing it on YouTube, and they're complaining having seen that.
But if you were to read a transcript of someone like some of Ricky Gervais's show or some stand-up comedy show, these guys are just comedians. You know, if you were to read that transcript and complain about that after the event, this went out after a watershed of 9 or 10 o'clock. That's when the show is.
Is it appropriate at any time of day to ring up a grandfather and leave obscene phone messages about what his granddaughter...
If you look at what his granddaughter said just then, that my grandfather rang me when he heard about it. My experience tells me in radio of spending 13 years doing wind-ups like this, that when you do a wind-up, you record a little voice bit that says, "Hello, I'm Andrew Sachs, I'm not here to take your call at the moment," and then you cut. So you leave an imaginary voicemail. I think we will find that these guys didn't ever actually leave the message on their phone. And when you hear her saying there, "Oh, when he heard about it," that doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, that's not the case, because the producers actually rang Andrew Sachs and asked him if he'd been offended by it, and he said yes. So
I suppose the point here, Will, is that that's why people are saying, calling for their heads now. The point is there should be an investigation, shouldn't there? But should the reaction from the BBC have been swifter?
Well, I was amazed that someone wasn't up there to camera quite quickly saying this was completely wrong, out of order, this is a national network. I don't accept the arguments about that Tim just made, because I think you're broadcasting on Radio 2, you're broadcasting to the nation, and they pay for it, remember, with a licence fee. And I think the BBC should look.
Who does it upset, though? I mean, it's upsetting. If it upsets Andrew Sachs and his granddaughter, fine. But how does it upset you or anyone watching this? I mean, get over it, get a life. It's no big deal. I mean,
I think paying a licence fee to a national broadcaster who has people who ring up and do that sort of thing, it's absolutely not what you should do. You can have a lot of fun, you can make a lot of jokes, you can be very risky, but that absolutely stepped over every line. I mean, do you have a grandmother, grandfather?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and you know, would you like people doing that?
I've done exactly what they did.
So your line would obviously, I mean, you're bound as well by certain compliance issues. I mean, the BBC might have different standards of decency, you might say, but as a broadcaster, you're still bound. I mean, you've had the sack.
Yeah, I've been fined 3 months ago over an issue, you know, a similar issue, and it's what I'm paid to do. It's what these guys do.
Well,
and you know, the BBC make the decision. Well, if the BBC make the decision to put these guys on, then explain.
Well, they've both got form in this area. You're absolutely right.
So should they have just been under stricter managerial editorial control?
Of course they should have done.
While Tim starts undressing to reveal his supported T-shirt, I'd like to ask you, Will, a question. Having been
What's that say?
I back
Brandon Ross.
Having been in a senior position in BBC management yourself, do you have an idea of what is going on behind the scenes, if anything? And why hasn't the Director General come out and said something?
Well, I think it's perfectly reasonable for the Director General not to pronounce until he knows exactly what's happened. And he's got a Director of Radio whose job it is to get to the bottom of this, find what the answer is, and go and say, this is exactly what happened. They ought to know by now, I would have thought. And I recommend that we do the following.
Okay, just want to bring in some of the emails because we have been inundated this morning. A lot of people actually totally against, I have to say, I'm with you on this one, Will, but a lot of people also saying, hang on a moment, and agreeing with you. I find the response to what was at worst a childish prank perpetuated by Brandon Ross incredible. Paul from Liverpool says if Sachs's granddaughter is so sensitive, maybe she shouldn't be with a provocative dance group. Maybe that's a different issue. But
I think she's just bitter because she's not with him.
Well,
the wrong way.
leaving out, to be honest, that has nothing to do with the central issue, does it? Really,
No.
which is making
But this central issue,
it can't even be potentially against the law.
But it shouldn't be the front page of every single newspaper.
Well, I mean, Ken
I
from
agree.
Hazelmere says any politician who comments on this is publicity-seeking and being populist. The country currently has bigger problems to get into perspective.
Absolutely. It's got out of hand, and anybody wants to give the BBC a kicking has now got an excuse to do so.
Yes.
But all the more reason to close it down very quickly.
Otherwise, it's going to be severely damaging to the BBC.
Well, people remember this sort of thing. They remember it, a lot longer than they remember some jolly good programmes, the poetry competition you were talking about earlier, I'm afraid.
A lot of listeners to Radio 1, Tim, did think it was okay. This has been blown out of proportion. It was funny, a joke. People are so boring. Just a couple of the comments. What was funny about it?
The awkwardness, and some of the scripting for the song, I think, was hilarious. I mean, if you look at the way comedians are nowadays, 90% of what is funny is offensive to somebody. And that when you go and see, I said this earlier, if you go and see Ricky Gervais or a stand-up comedian, if you sit and analyse what you find funny, it's probably offensive to some group. Now, this is offensive, as far as I'm concerned, to two people, his granddaughter and to Andrew Sachs, and that's as far as it goes. And now to find that it was 100,000th of a percentage of their audience who complained. That's nothing. They shouldn't be fired for that. If a big percentage of the people that watch or listen to their programme find that offensive, then yes. But for the target demographic, now, if you were to do it on this show, I'd expect you to get 30% of people watching complaining. But at 10 o'clock on BBC Radio 2, night time over the weekend, it demonstrates the fact that 100,000 of 1% of people found it offensive, and all of a sudden 10,000 more people have made it, and the Prime Minister all of a sudden that say this is outrageous. I think that's outrageous. Let it be. It's no big deal. Calm down. The whole country just needs to calm down and say, so what? This stuff happens. I've been doing it for years.
And Will, just final point on that then.
Well, I think it's gone over the top now, absolutely. But there's no doubt there are rules, and if you go to see Ricky Gervais in a theatre, you paid your money, you know what you're going to get. If you're listening to BBC Radio, it's paid for by a licence fee that everybody pays for. I think different rules obtain.
Right, turn it off if you don't like it, that's what I say.
Okay.
Guys, thank you very
Thanks
much. Thank you for coming in and giving us your perspective.